Okay, so I'm logged in as a company right now. I'm not logged in as the appliance admin. I'm logged in as if I was the admin of the company who's setting this up for other users. So we've got a bigger view than we would get if we were a normal user. A normal user would really just get the file manager and they wouldn't get anything else. It would be preset as to how the company admin wants to set it up. And the first thing that the company admin would normally do is they'd go across to their dashboard and they'd add, whatever clouds they're interested in. So whatever clouds that their company is using, be that private or be that public. In the case of here, I've set up Ceph and I've set up FTP. So Ceph is an object storage cloud by Red Hat. We've got it installed locally, so we run on a local Ceph instance, and we're working against that Ceph instance. And the product itself, just for demo purposes, comes with a local CentOS FTP. So if you just want to fire it up out the box and have a play around with it, with some dummy data, you can do that straight away. Once the admin is set up what clouds they want, they'll set up their users. So in this case, there's just me. I've just set up an admin account. But what I could have done is gone into the authentication systems and decided to, maybe set this up with my LDAP system, or maybe set it up with my Active Directory system. And from then on in, every time I authenticate, it will be using my existing LDAP or Active Directory password. That means that I control them from the same place I've always controlled them, which may be like a Linux console, or it may be, Microsoft AD, but I'm not controlling them here. So if I want to change a user's password, I go back to my existing system and change it. And the way that it works from a storage made easy viewpoint is that, we basically go and ask for permission to log in this user from that underlying system. It comes back and tells us whether we can. If we can, we issue a token. That token is valid for a session, for the session that the user's in. Once that's been done, then the admin is free to set up any team folders that he wants the users to see. So this is a key piece. We've set up our storage, we've set up our users. By default, this is a permissive system. That means the users will get user space, but they won't get access to anything else. They'll just get some user space on whatever your nominated cloud is. If you want them to see anything else that already exists, you need to share the folder and then you need to set permissions. When you share the folder initially, you'll get no access permissions because it's permissive. You'd have to go through, find the user or find the role and add permissions. It's visual. It's a pretty easy thing to do in terms of setting it. You literally just click in, you find I've got a role there called marketing. I could set write access permissions for marketing if I wanted to. And once you've done this, it's honoured through all of the apps and tools and clients that we have. And it's a very strong feature because it means that you can take your existing identity management system, you can take your existing roles, and then you can start to make them applicable to resources that may be on different systems completely. So you've got a common viewpoint and a common place of control to control user access into different folders. The other thing that the admin's going to do is he's going to go and look at his options or his policies. We talked earlier in the slides about user governance. User governance in the main is about turning things off. What don't I want the users to be able to do? And there's a number of different things you can do here. The file sharing policy, and we talked earlier about, all right, you can password protect files, you can time expire files, you can limit them to maybe one download. But what if I want to do that all the time? Or what if I want to do that for a particular resource? You can do that here. So you can set that, and then again it'll ripple through all of the different apps and clients. So that if you then go into the iOS app and you want to share a file, you may have preset it that it has to have a password and that you can only have it for 24 hours. And that it's only one download link. Why only one download? Stops the person forwarding the email to somebody else after they've downloaded it. So you know that you're protected from that viewpoint. Security permissions, normal stuff. Do I want to force strong passwords? Do I want to have two-factor authentication? The normal security things you can have, plus some others. So you might want to be able to prohibit access only from certain IP addresses. So you could, for example, if you have a branch office that has a fixed IP address, you could decide that you only want that branch office and you to be able to access the appliance. Anybody else that's not from that IP address wouldn't get in. We talked earlier about encryption. This is where you would enter the encryption phrase. Once files are encrypted, you have to be able to get them back through the SMA appliance. If you try and access them direct, you won't be able to. They look like the same file, but when you try and open them, you won't be able to. So if you've got sensitive data that you want to maybe store on SharePoint or Office 365 or Amazon S3, and you've been reticent about doing it because you're worried about storing it on public cloud, then you can do it here, in the knowledge that it will be encrypted before it lands on that cloud, which is a pretty big thing. You know that if anybody gets direct access to that box or that machine and they literally swipe it, take it away, take a copy of it, they still couldn't get access to your data. We talked earlier about versioning and trash. This is where you can set those options. Data classifications are interesting because they're domain specific and you can build up your own domain hierarchies. So what does that mean? A tag is a type of classification. I think we're all familiar today with what tags do. They allow you to put some commonality around files stored in different places, maybe with different names and meanings. So if I had a couple of files that I got from Dan, but I wanted to remember they were from Dan, I might tag them Dan. So that when I'm looking for them and I can't remember the file name or what they were, I type in Dan, my two files pop up. So it's a useful thing to do. It allows you to group sets of data. Classifications extends that with some domain specificity. And what that means is, if you work maybe in the healthcare industry and you want to have a classification that's a HIPAA number, then you can start to, and you've got a document that is HIPAA numbers, you can start to tag it with HIPAA numbers so that you can easily find it. And you can do that for other ones like legal, with witness or trial. So you can have your own domain classification that makes sense to you and your organization, and you can start to use them to group things that otherwise may not look grouped. And in our search interface, when we do in our searches, we can use those classifications as a filter mechanism to decide how we bring back search results. In terms of the user interface, what we found over time is that one size doesn't fit all, which means that some users want a slightly more advanced user interface, some companies want a slightly less advanced user interface. So what we allow you to do here is we allow you complete control over how that looks for your end users. So anything that you don't want in the user interface, take it out. If you just want a super simple user interface, just click on Simplify User View, and it'll automatically figure out all those options for you. You can control the notifications at a global level, so broadcast notifications for comments for your users from here. And we talked about branding. So from a branding perspective, there are two different tenants. The first tenant is the ISP. The ISP tenant allows you to brand the look and feel completely to how you want it to be. The per company tenant or per department tenant allows them some customizations too. So they could, for example, change their logo. They can change what their email template looks like. And actually, once done, they'll get their own unique address to get into the product. So they wouldn't need to go to the normal address. They'd have a unique one that would honor that branding. The other thing we talked about earlier was audit logs. So these audit logs are formalized here for the admin to be able to filter against and also to be able to export and archive. Now, for the technical people among us, these audit logs right now are stored in the database, and they can be exported using CSV or as XLS. However, if you already have logs that you keep inside of the company and you want to use these as part of those logs, you can output these in syslog format by configuring at an appliance level. And then you can use some sort of log aggregator to reap these up, and then you can decide what you want to do with them. And if you do that, you'll still get them in this format, but you'll also get them in syslog format. Last thing I just want to touch upon, because it often comes up, is okay. So what about quotas? So you can put a quota limit on for users at a global level, and then for each user that you then add, you can add individual quotas, or for each role you then add, you can add individual quotas, which would then override the global level. So you've got quite a lot of flexibility on what you want to do around quotas. And lastly, on the web side, we've got the file manager. So the file manager itself, again, is meant to be quite flexible from a user perspective. So right now we're in what I in a friendly way term the Dropbox view, which is flat. You see what you see is what you get. I can only see my hierarchy of my current directory structure, but I can flick back into my hierarchical view. Why is the hierarchical view important? If you're dealing with large data sets and you're trying to navigate through a directory tree, you try doing it in flat view. You'll pretty much start wishing for this other view back. But the good thing about it is you don't have to keep it there all the time. You can get rid of it. We've also got this concept of having at the side here a viewer, so that if we want to see what we're dealing with, we can go away and we can view the file if the file is viewable. We also get info about the file. So is the file locked? Is it encrypted? What's its path? When was it created? Where is it stored? What's the geolocation? So we get all of that type of information as well. And lastly, we can start to make comments on the file. So this idea of collaborating through comments, and depending on the file type, depends on what actions available. So the other thing that we can do is we can create new files, right from here. So if we want to create a new Word file and then edit it, we can. If we want to create a new site link, I talked this idea about bookmarks, then we can do it from here. If we just simply want a plain text note, we can do it from here. And of course, we can tag it as we're doing it. So you've got actually something that pretty much resembles, you can work on this as you work on your desktop. A user could very easily just be happy with working on what we have here without ever needing to touch the desktop apps. However, we do have desktop apps, and I'm on a Mac right now, so one of the things I've got is this little icon here that basically allows me to have a view of what we've got here, but on my desktop as a drive. So this concept of a view that allows me to navigate through my structure. And all you're really seeing is the stubs of the files here. They'll only again be downloaded on demand. So if you've got a very large data estate and you want to get access to that very large data estate, the drive's a perfect way of doing that. The other thing you can do is, once you're hooked in, is you can try and search for any files that might exist. So I've just searched for PNG files on this local instance through my little search tool, which is indexed them, and it finds them straight away. So you've got a lot of direct integration into the user's workflow. So you don't really have to say, hey, just use a web browser. If you want to move from a filer-based system, and you want to move some of that stuff on the cloud, and you want to make it very similar to what they're used to, you can. You can give them a drive letter. You can give them tools to easily get access. We can even integrate into the email system. So when you install SME, you get this extra little icon, be it in Outlook or be it in Mac Mail. And when you launch it, guess what? It goes away and it gives you exactly the same view that you had before. And it's pretty neat because once you're in it, you can share links. And guess what? If we just set a policy, the same policy would have been on a DIA. And even better, guess what? Everything's audited. So when your guys are sharing links in the field, you've got full traceability all the way back. No more, who sent this email? Where did that file extension from? How did this data leak occur? You've got everything here. And talking of data leaks, one of the nice things we can do, we can start to think about what we want to do with ransomware. So ransomware is becoming quite a big thing. You've got copies of files locally. Somebody manages to get a virus onto your data estate, and then boom, you have to pay them some money before you can get the files back. And in some cases, depending on the organization, that's quite a lot of money. So what we can do is we can add a new provider, except we can make it a backup provider. And what will happen then is it will archive all of the current local files to backup. And any changes that are made will be treated as new files. So if somebody locks all your primary set of files, you can always go back to the backup where you've replicated everything and get them back. So it's a very, very nice way of being able to mitigate ransomware. So we've gone through the web piece. We've gone through one of the client tools. We've got exactly the same for Windows. We've got exactly the same for Linux. And we've also got mobile apps that work exactly the same structure. And the mobile apps also sync folders and files back to the mobile app. So you've got a very comprehensive ecosystem that you can work with. And I've only barely touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of the features that the product has. But you can sort of see that it's a very rich ecosystem that can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be.